Ahoy there, me hearties. This be Captain Silverhook, and you're listening to the Two Old Pirates podcast. Set sail for an open sea of stories, tales, and some really crazy stuff. I expect you to like and subscribe, lest you be walking the plank. Ha ha ha!
Anyways, so this is episode 105, and it's going to be something kind of cool. I came up with this idea, and I was talking to Vinny about it. I was like, hey, everybody loves music. And I was like, what about if we did the best artist, musician, band from each state?
Yeah.
And there's so many of you out there that love certain artists, and you didn't know that they're from this state or that state. And we're going to be biased because we're going to list off some of the other bands that we did not choose from each of these states as we do this. It's going to be a 5-part series. Yeah. This is going to be part 1. This is going to be also the last podcast that we do for the season 5. And we'll be starting season 6 very soon on our next episode, which is, I didn't think that would start. We did the first one in 2019, a long time ago. And
I wasn't even co-host of the show back there.
And now we're about to enter season 6 stuff. So we hope that you enjoy this. If we pick a singer or a band that you do not approve of, and that you think somebody else from that state should have got it, comment.
Yeah, let me know.
Because there's some bands that are not from where you think they're from.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we're gonna start off. Okay, so our first state.
Our first state is Alabama. Going alphabetically, Alabama. Of course, from that state is the band Alabama, but I didn't pick them. I went with a lot of people don't really know he's from Alabama, but I picked Jimmy Buffett. Yeah, that's who I went with. And the reason I did that is because Jimmy Buffett defined the island vibe, the beach, not really beach in the sense like the Beach Boys. That was more of a surf thing, but you know what I mean? Like Margaritaville, right? Just chilling out on the beach, drinking beer.
I think when most people think about Jimmy Buffett, they think of the ocean or a boat or just relaxing. Just the island life.
Yeah. So all of his fans are called parrot heads, right? They're the people that follow him. And Jimmy Buffett, I bring up Margaritaville, but he also had the cheeseburger song and all of those. He had a string of hits that was just called the Big 8, and they were all just about relaxing island life.
And most people attach him to what state? Florida.
Yeah.
But he's from Alabama. So that's why we're being tricky with this.
And Margaritaville became like a thing. It's a franchise. It's like a lifestyle. It's a chain of restaurants. There's one in Vegas. I ate there. Yeah, clothing line,
clothing,
everything. And then of course Jimmy Buffett did appear as himself in Jurassic World at the Margaritaville in the fictional park. And he's the only person that when the dinosaurs break out, he's drinking 2 margaritas and he gets up and runs away. So if you're watching that, he's the guy.
And like how we talked earlier about, there's a lot of bands that have their fans have certain names. So like the Grateful Dead, they're the Deadheads and different things like that. And Jimmy Buffett's fans are known as
the Parrot Heads.
The Parrot Heads.
Because
parrot goes along with the pirates and the whole
beach,
ocean thing.
So, but I figured, he defined a genre. That's like a thing, right? It's like a lifestyle.
It wasn't really country.
Yeah.
It wasn't really pop music. It was kind of like this just relaxing, kind of cool.
We have Alaska next, the 49th state. This one was kind of hard because there's not really a lot of bands and groups that are from Alaska. It really came down to 2.
And I remember...
one is a technicality.
I remember when I was talking to Vinny about doing this one, and then I kind of looked some of these up. I cheated and looked up his before he looked up his, and I saw this, and I was like... I'm just going to give you a forewarning. You might be stuck in Alaska because you don't have a huge arsenal here to pick from.
I basically had 2 choices. I had Jewel and Portugal the Man. And Jewel is like a 2-hit wonder. She's... but Jewel was really big in the 90s with her debut album, Pieces of You. And her biggest single that I think charted at number 1, or number 2, was "You Were Meant for Me," and also the single "Foolish Games," which also
she also
charted.
had a song,
but
I have small hands. But she was very popular for a while, and she wrote all her own music too.
She did, and then that's the thing is she had these 2 hits. "You Were Meant for Me." I remember that, but I think the one everybody knows her for was "Who Will Save Your Soul."
That was her first big hit,
and that only charted at number 11. It wasn't even a top 10 hit. But I think when I think of Jewel, I think of that song. I also think of her funny-looking teeth.
She had that one snaggle tooth that she never fixed. She's multimillionaire, and she's all like, I think I'll keep that. It doesn't look right.
Moving on, up next is Arizona. There's quite a few performers from Arizona. And looking at them, I had to go with the king of shock rock himself, Alice Cooper. This is a man who's kind of like how Jimmy Buffett defined like the island lifestyle. Alice Cooper, horror rock, shock rock. He was known for his gruesome concerts and tours and things like that, like $1 Billion Babies. That was really shocking.
And I think like Vinny and me were talking about, we're not going by the ones that had the most number one hits or something. Because when we look at Arizona, there's a lot of artists from there that are maybe even more popular or wealthier. But
looking at
Cooper,
this,
I was alive. You were not alive. I was alive. The first time I ever saw him come out with the white face kind of and the black dripping tears and a big bow around his neck.
Scary.
It was shocking. And at that time they had to like pull him off, and then of course we know Marilyn Manson, all this other stuff. But that's why he mostly picked him as great music, but also the shock factor.
Yes, you wouldn't have Marilyn Manson if you didn't have Alice Cooper. He laid
Kiss, nothing like that.
He set the stage. So I think everybody knows him for that song "School's Out." They played it all the time. No, I picked for Arkansas. I had to pick the man in black. I had to pick Johnny Cash. He's one of the best-selling artists of all time. He sold over 90 million total albums. He was making music back in I think the 50s or 60s when he started.
50s.
Yeah. With Folsom Prison Blues.
That was in the 60s, but in the 50s.
Yeah, but in the 50s, he had his Big Blue Guitar, whatever his debut album was.
We could talk for hours about the song and stuff, but the thing is, he was also. Do you know why he was known as the Man in Black?
Because that's how he dressed for his shows, right?
The reason why he wore black, he said to wear that for all the common people out there that never get anything, that are the downtrodden, the poor, the homeless. He's all, I wear this to remember you. Yeah. So he never wanted to get his ego so big that he thought he was like a rock and roll star. So he was best friends with Elvis during. Yeah. They both came up at the same time. Elvis went pop. Johnny Cash stayed country.
Country, yeah. And I know he opened all of his shows with, "Hello, I'm Johnny Cash."
Yeah. Hello, I'm Johnny Cash.
This man, several genres of music.
And he really did create what we now consider outlaw country.
Yeah.
And then you had Waylon Jennings come after that, Willie Nelson and Merle Haggard and stuff like that. But he was the original. He was an American hero, basically.
And he wrote over 1,000 songs, even.
And to know that you're truly an artist is when you can take somebody else, their very, very popular song, and redo it in a completely different fashion and make it better. And you know what song I'm talking about.
Hurt, of course.
Hurt. Nine Inch Nails had an amazing song called Hurt, and they were electronic, hard,
grunge,
aggressive,
dirty rock,
And then he comes in, and he was ill, and he recorded a stripped-down version.
Like I said, we're going into California now. Big state? I went purely by who was the most successful band.
So before you say who it is, why don't you say your honorable mentions?
Okay, so honorable
these
mentions,
are the bands that did make it in Vinny's eyes.
The Beach Boys, right? Guys, they invented surf rock. That whole sound. Metallica, Metallica. Black metal, thrash. Green Day. Probably the most recognizable American punk band ever, Green Day. And then there's also Van Halen and Guns N' Roses. Hard rock, memorable songs, legendary bands. CCR, Creedence Clearwater Revival. And then, of course, The Doors. That's Jim Morrison.
And the Doobie Brothers.
And
I have to throw the Doobie Brothers in there. And none of those made it. Vinny.
Yeah.
Who did you pick?
Well, the Eagles. And like I said, I went for this one. I had to go by numbers. The Eagles' greatest hits, 1971 to 75. That album is worldwide the 5th best-selling album ever, and in the United States, just this country, it is the best-selling album of all time. I feel like no matter what, look. Red Hot Chili Peppers, Metallica, Beach Boys, Green Day. I mean,
none of them were even close.
None of them, they didn't have the number one album in the entire country. And then, of course, the Eagles are they're known for a lot of songs, but
They
Hotel,
basically
yeah.
invented, well, they perfected country rock.
Yes,
Very
and-
soft country type rock music.
Yeah. Everybody knows Hotel California. Everybody knows that song. Probably their most famous song, and then the album Hotel California that song is from, worldwide, that album is the 7th best-selling album of all time.
When they hit the home run, it was a grand slam.
So in the top 10 best-selling albums of all time, they're in there twice. Like I said, a lot of talented groups came out of countless. Too many to count.
So that was the first 5. Then we go alphabetically to the next 5.
Next 5.
And so I start off with Colorado. So Colorado, there was literally only 2 bands that I could think that were big enough or had sold enough or made that much of an impression. One Republic and The Fray. And like Vinny said, you hear the word The Fray and you go with
How to Save a Life. Where did I go wrong?
The Fray sold 5 million albums so far in their career, and they had 4 top 40 hits. And One Republic has sold 2 million albums and had 10 top 40 hits and 2 number 2 hits. I was really leaning towards One Republic, but I'm not really a fan of either band. But as Vinny pointed out to me, he's all, can you think of any songs that as soon as you hear One Republic, you're like, oh, that one song.
No.
And How to Save a Life was a huge song for The Fray, and because of that, I'm going to have to go with The Fray in Colorado. The next one after that is Connecticut. Oh, Connecticut. The 3 that I whittled it down to were Michael Bolton, who was extremely big in the mid to late 80s, all through the 90s, and almost into the 2000s with his very deep, husky voice. And John Mayer, who's been around for about, doesn't seem as long, but he's been around about 20 years now, and he's written a lot of hits and stuff, and he's a phenomenal guitar player. And then the Carpenters, the soft hit band from the 70s that sold so many records, it was unbelievable and stuff, and they were very, very popular. And so I started looking at their numbers, and Michael Bolton had sold 28 million records, and he had 18 top 40 hits, and he had 2 number 1 hits. John Mayer, he sold 17.5 million records, and he had 10 top 40 hits. So he's had his slice of the pie. And then you go to the Carpenters. Remember, Karen Carpenter died in 1982 or 83 of anorexia nervosa. She'd been suffering with a bad self-image for years and had starved herself literally to death to where she went into cardiac arrest. She was only like 31 or 30 or something like that, so very, very young to die. And after about 77 or 78, they didn't really have a whole lot of hits because she was having problems emotionally and stuff. So they, in that short amount of time from about 70 to about 77, 78, they sold 24.5 million copies of records. They had 20 top 40 hits, and they had 3 number 1 hits and about 4 number 2 hits. So as I look at the work, Bolton is very successful, but the Carpenters are still played on the radio more often than Bolton. So I got to go.
I hear them more. Yeah,
I got to go with the Carpenters as the best to come out of Connecticut. And I looked through Delaware, and there's a bunch of artists I'd never heard of any of them. The only one I'd heard of is a guy that I remember watching a video back in the early 80s on MTV, and I thought the song was really cool sounding. And his name was George Thorogood.
Oh, yeah.
And I think his band was The Destroyers.
The Destroyers. Oh,
and he was 100% old school rhythm and blue.
Yeah.
Just the white dude, but he could play the guitar, and he had this gravelly voice. I think he made it off of just smoking cigarettes and drinking whiskey. But I was surprised because the song I grew up with was called "Bad to the Bone,"
Oh, yeah.
and everybody's heard it.
That riff.
Yep.
Like
He came up with that riff, and it has lasted. It's fed him for 40 years.
Yeah.
The thing is, out of Delaware, he's the only one that I can even consider as being the person that you'd go ahead and say represents Delaware for the greatest musician or artist of all time. Then, like Vinny going into California, I had to go into 2 large states that had a bunch of famous people, and I was like, who the hell do you pick? So we're going to Florida. And in Florida,
which is not where Jimmy Buffett is
the
from.
honorable mentions that I've got on here are Leonard Skinner, Gloria Estefan and the Miami Sound Machine, big 80s, early 90s band, Matchbox 20, the Allman Brothers, which is considered, and then you had NSYNC and Backstreet Boys, which I think is just like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It's okay every now and then, but you don't want to have it all the time. So the one I picked, and is actually one of my favorites, and that's probably I'm biased, but Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Whether solo or with the Heartbreakers, it's some of the most amazing American music. So he's sold with the Heartbreakers, 23.5 million albums, and solo he sold about 8.5 million. So you add that together, it's over 30 million that he sold. He died unfortunately very young. He had 15 top 40 hits, never hit number one. He hit number 3 a couple times.